We're on, we're live, sound's on, everything's good? Yes, sound's on, everything's good? Yes, hello? Was that a no or a yes? Marty, is the sound on? Okay. Everybody on live stream is going, yes, Rabbi, we can hear you already. What's going on? You have to understand on the live stream that there is a big screen TV thing blocking my view of the soundboard. So I can't see anything. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Tuesday night Torah study. We're very excited to have all of us here. I'm noticing that we are dwindling in numbers as the weather gets colder. Shameful. It's warm in here, at least it will be. We can affect that temperature, turn it up a little bit, but we should all be here. But we do have some seats already filled, which is great, and we have more people out here. Awesome. Okay, so tonight we're going to do, for those of you on live stream, what we do each week, which is we're going to go ahead and read the weekly Torah portion and then have a discussion. We'll also take up any prayer needs if there are any, and we'll also have a couple of quick announcements just to make sure everybody knows what's going on. I don't think I have too many for that, but we'll announce a few things possibly. Otherwise, I think we're pretty much good to go as we continue in our journey through Bereshit, through Genesis, and we're beginning in chapter 12 today with Lech Lecha, which is our introduction to Avram. So we're going to be very excitedly dealing with Avram this week, and so the story is going to continue. All right, so why don't you go ahead and grab the mic? And so if we have any prayer needs and praise reports, we can kind of cover that real quickly. Are we not on yet, Manny? Are we on live so you can get praise and prayer? Okay, you are? Good, okay. All right, so anybody here? Okay, we begin with, we'll let Connor aim at Rabbi Tom. There we go. All right, Rabbi Tom, go ahead.
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.
I just want to thank Almighty Yahweh that this past weekend I finally got to see one of my great-grandchildren. That was a blessing from him. And Daniel and Peyton made it back safely to Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And Daniel was very impressed with his visit here. You know, I don't know what he's going to do with that impression, but we pray for him. And we pray for the mother of the baby, too. You know, so I'd like to ask the congregation to pray for both of them, for Peyton. And,
Amen.
And
I can tell you from our side of it was a great pleasure meeting your grandson and your great-granddaughter. Yeah. And we enjoyed them both very much.
And I'd also like to add to pray for the brethren in the Philippines.
Yes, we can do that. We can pray for them. And I know that they are actively, and you can pray for this, are actively, you know, collecting and saving up funds to try to get me a ticket at some point so I can get out there to the Philippines to help with what they're doing out there. So, you know, hopefully I'll be able to get out there at some point, which would be, you know, very exciting to go to the Philippines. Okay, anybody else? Okay, Michelle's got her hand up in the back here.
I just want to ask prayer for Lynn. She's going to have neck surgery on Friday. So if we can keep her in prayer that all goes well and she has a speedy recovery.
Amen. For all the rest of you, you're getting verbal neck surgery as we're trying to get those stiff necks to be loose. Ouch. All right, Charles.
I just want to ask prayer. I mentioned him a couple of weeks ago. My dad's cousin, Donnie, is got stage 4 cancer, and it's in his lungs. And just pray for them. They can't operate. They need to do chemo and radiation, but they can't do it because it's too close to his esophagus. And just pray for him because he's got a wife and 2 little girls, and it's pretty hard on them. So just keep him in your prayers.
Absolutely. All right, anybody else? Okay, coming around to the live stream. Let's see. Okay.
Rachel Atkins, praise report. She had to have an echocardiogram of her baby's heart in utero. The doctor said she's happy baby and has a perfect heart.
Amen.
And actually, prayer for her husband who's out traveling too, away from home. So prayer for
Okay.
safe travels.
Yes.
Olivia and Janet Hoffman, Mishpachah, kindly pray for continued discernment and understanding for our family. April's praise report for her cellulitis is going away faster than doctors expected. Danielle Taylor, prayer requests. October 21st is my SIL. Went in for surgery on her heart. She's been sedated since, had a leg amputated, and had a stroke that caused brain damage. There's nothing doctors can do now. Earl Lee, prayer for his Marco Polo brothers. Cheryl, prayer for my brother Rick, who's scheduled for surgery November 12th for his cancer, also unspoken. Kaylin Lee, prayer request. My uncle had a heart attack and no brain activity, and my brother's gender confusion, and my sister as she seeks the Father. Arthur and Linda, continued prayer for Linda, still feeling ill, high blood pressure, and taken to emergency again at 2 a.m. Tuesday. Released after blood pressure brought down. Owls about. Urgent prayer for Eric and his children. Namagasa, prayer for my home and marriage. Let's see, Carl, I pray Abba will smite the cancer. Caitlin Lee again prays for my daughter's very speedy recovery. Danielle Taylor, prayer request continue. Please pray for her husband and 4 daughters during this time. MTOI Philippines, Jet Singh. Praise report. Thank you, Abba and Rabbi Steve. We are growing here in the Philippines.
Amen.
Sharon Corley, prayer for a dear friend's husband who is struggling with depression. And I know there's a delay here, so I'm probably going to get more, but there were a lot of unspoken prayers, and I'm sure there's going to be some that I'm going to miss.
All right. Just continued prayer as the weather changes for people going through the process of being under the weather, as happens often when the weather changes. And so we had a beautiful day that's now getting cold again, but it was warm earlier today, and that's kind of the weather swings that we're getting. See, climate change is real. I mean, the climate changed twice just today. We had a little bit of spring, summer almost, and now we're getting winter again, so the fall, winter. See, so we had 4 seasons in one day. See, climate changed. Global warming lasted about 4 hours this afternoon, and now it's cool again. Anyway, I got to praise. We did, I think, get the problem finally solved at my house with our thermostat, because we had a problem with that. It turns out that the previous owners at some point must have had a battery they left in it too long, and it corroded some of the inner workings. But then they replaced it with new batteries, but because it had done whatever damage it did, it just kind of worked intermittently. So we could set it and it would go on maybe for 3 minutes and go off again, or it would just randomly go on 7 hours later and stay on for 2 hours. I mean, it was one of those things that we seemed like we had no control over. So we put a new one in today, and we're hoping that that one now is going to work much better. We also dealt with some of the ingenious things that I'm sure all of us deal with in products, that the thermostat that was on the second floor of the house, all we could read was just the number. There was no controls. Well, if you lift the cover off, which is blocking all the controls, it's like, well, why would you build something so you couldn't even, it's not like it was a lid that has a handle on it you're supposed to pivot in. No, you had to actually take the faceplate off. And the heating and air guy said, most people just throw that out. He says, it's just a dumb design. Because once you pull that thing off, it's like, oh, look, all the controls then work the thing. And why would you build it that way? Because we couldn't figure it out. Anyway, so some of you online are going, oh, that's Rabbi, you're so dumb. That was the way, everybody knows how those things work. Well, I don't. Look, I know Torah, I don't know technology. What can I do? Okay? That's why I ended up having the technology guys need me to help them with Torah, and I didn't fix my thermostat. That's how it works. Okay? And then everybody's happy. Okay. Let me think if there's any other things that we need to pray about. I think that's going to cover it for right now. Also, for anybody that's contacted us, and there's been a lot of people contacted us since Saturday even, so that has need of prayer, so we certainly pray for those people as well. We got a lot of people still looking to get better jobs or get better employment or get employed who are not employed, and let's keep them in prayer. We also have a lot of people that are considering making the move here and are looking for their situations to clarify so that can be done. And I think on top of that, we also have some things that are going on here with the growth that we certainly could use prayer with as we try to reconfigure the building. It seems like almost on an every other week basis to rework things to fit the growing amount of people that are here. Oh, and we have a praise. We just hit 20,000 subscribers. Almost forgot about that. And so, and if any of you are on, like any of you are on now and you have not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It does help us to reach people because our videos will pop up more and more on the sidebar of people when they're watching other things. And so 20,000, that's a pretty big number. We've had over 5,000 subs added this year. So that means that we've got, basically 25% of our numbers we got this year. Okay, even though we've been since about 2013 or so on YouTube. So it's been, a steadily growing sort of curve there. Okay? So we really appreciate that. And again, we only ask praise and share praise on that because it's not about us. It's about the more the numbers show, the more we know we're being effective in trying to do what we're mandated to do, which is provide for those that are isolated and not having something locally. As a matter of fact, I spoke to somebody earlier today. I speak to people almost every day that wish they could have what you have here, and they don't have it where they are. And not everybody can move. It's not so simple. I mean, for some people, it's a little simpler, but for most people, it's not simple to move. Especially, it's hard if you're locally where you are and you've got a couple of children and there aren't any children except in the secular world or the church you used to go to. But when you come out of all that mess, your children are like, now who do we play with and what do we do and where do we go? And what a blessing to be here with so many children. Okay, so it's really a great situation. Okay. So I think that will cover it for the prayer needs. As long as before we open, I'll also give some quick announcements. Just a reminder, for those of you on live stream, every week we do live stream our service on Saturday, and that's at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. 1:15 is when we really start, and so you're welcome to access that. All the teachings that I do are available for a small fee. No, they're all free. Okay, everything's free. It's online on YouTube, Podomatic, iTunes, wherever. We can get it. Wherever you can find things, it's all available free. If you need and you have no data plan that can handle it or you have bandwidth issues, we could even mail you the CDs, okay? So we do that. All right. Coming up, for those of you that are here locally, just to get the word around, a reminder that we are planning to do a Thanksgiving gathering here on Thursday the 28th, I think. Okay, I'm not sure what the day is in November. I'm thinking it's the 28th. Okay? And so we'll give you more information as we get closer to that. And then in December, I will be taking a much-needed vacation, but I won't be missing anything but the Tuesday study, and Rabbi Tom will be doing that. Okay? So, but I will be finally getting much-needed time getting reacquainted with the ice cream machine on a boat. It's a new boat. I haven't been on it, so I have to get the layout and figure out where they keep that machine, since I've not been on this boat before. No. I am going to Jason's Deli to warm up, because they do give you the free ice cream there with your meal, so it's kind of practice. All right, anyway, enough silliness. Let's go ahead and get this thing opened up. I need someone to pray and open us in prayer. Where's the mic? I already put it back? Well, Rabbi Tom, go ahead and grab the mic and open us in prayer. Well, you're right there. Go ahead and do it. You could do it. Why not? Well, go. But you have the mic. Why don't you open us?
Abba Yahweh, Avinu Malkeinu. Father, we thank you that we have another time to gather together, to study your Torah, to learn. Father, we ask you to bless this study. Open our hearts and our minds and our ears, and let these words that we read sink into us, and let us put ourselves into this Torah and see what is in here for us. and see how we can improve our lives and draw closer to you by reading the words that we're going to read tonight. Again, Father, we ask your blessing on everyone who's here, whether they're here personally or on the live stream. And we thank you again, Father, for the privilege of coming before you. We thank you most of all for Yeshua, our Messiah, and our Redeemer. And Father, we look forward with great anticipation to his coming and the establishment of the millennial reign in your kingdom, which is what all this is leading up to. We ask you to hear and accept this prayer. B'Shem Yeshua Meshikenu. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you. All right, so let me just kind of review for everyone how this works. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and read this week's Torah portion. If you are planning to maybe have a comment or question, it would be helpful probably to take notes. So you should have something to write on and be able to take those notes. I mean, I actively just, hopefully setting the right example, but I actively take notes every Torah portion, even though I've probably done these more than almost any of you have done these. But, every time I'm open and ready to hear something new, see something new, make some sort of a new connection or new discernment or something. I'm always open to whatever the Father may give every time we go through. And I always get something. And so you should be not sitting there going, oh, man, I've done this so many times. Well, there's always something more that you can glean. Father always has more levels and more insights and more things for you to go, oh. And by the way, they're almost always going to be in things you already knew, but you just didn't actually understand or receive the way you needed to. Okay, so be ready for that. This week's Torah portion is Lech Lecha, which means go yourself out. It's Genesis 12:1 through 17:27. Okay, so it's going to take us to the end of chapter 17, I believe. Yes? All right, because we're going to start in 18 with the next one. Yep. Okay, so we're going to read chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. I've got 12 readings, and I've got already 6 people sitting with the 7th over here, so we're good to go. We'll just need to fill up 5 more chairs. All right? Well, now we've got to fill up 4 more chairs. Okay, which is good. Okay, we've got 8 of you already situated. Perfect. And after we do the readings, then I may make the announcements again. There wasn't much announcements, just to remind everybody that services are every week, that you can then be a part of that. We are still working on the Passover stuff, and hopefully we'll have that up here in a couple of weeks. I am meeting with the website people on Thursday, and then hopefully we'll get that cranking even more. I also plan to have on the site, maybe after Thursday, the dates for 2020 that you'll need to have from your bosses and all that stuff on the website, okay? That is part of on my task list. Okay, so that all being said, we're going to go through the readings, and we'll begin with, you want to go first? No, over here. Okay, we'll begin with your wife. Okay, Rebbe and Joanne, come on up. Okay. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rebbe and Joanne, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, go ahead and get us started in chapter 12 and read verses 1 through 10.
And Yahweh said to Abram, go yourself out to your land, from your relatives and from your father's house, to a land which I show you. And I shall make you a great nation, and bless you, and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you. And in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram left as Yahweh had commanded him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot and his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the beginning beings whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan. And they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as Terebinth tree of Moriah. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land, and Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, "Your seed I give this land." And he built there a slaughter place to Yahweh, who had appeared to him. And from there he moved to the mountains east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there a slaughter place to Yahweh and called on the name of Yahweh. And Abram set out, continuing toward the south. And a scarcity of food came to be in the land. And Abram went down to Mitzrayim to dwell there, for the scarcity of food was severe in the land.
Amen. Okay, thank you, Rebbe and Joanne. Okay, Kathy? He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Kathy, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us now from verse 11 to the end of chapter 12.
Thank you. And it came to be, when he was close to entering Mitzrayim, that he said to Sarai, his wife, "See, I know that you are a beautiful woman to look at. And it shall be, when the Mitzrites see you, and they shall say, 'This is his wife,' and they shall kill me, but let you live. Please say you are my sister, so that it shall be well with me for your sake, and my life be spared because of you." And it came to be, when Abram came into Mitzrayim, that the Mitzrites saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. And Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. And he treated Abram well for her sake. And he had sheep and cattle and male donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels. But Yahweh plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not inform me that she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister'? And so I was going to take her for my wife. Look, here is your wife. Take her and go." And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had.
Amen. Amen. Okay, next up is Charles. That's right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Charles, has come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Charles, go ahead and take us now to chapter 13, reading verses 1 through 9.
And Abram went up from Mizraim into the south, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him. And Abram was very rich in livestock and in silver and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethaniel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethaniel and Ai, to the place of the slaughter place, which he had made at the first. And there Abram called on the name of Yahweh. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And at that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites dwelt in the land. And Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. It's not all the land before you. Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I'll go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I'll go to the left.
Amen. Okay, thank you, Charles. Okay, Rick. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rick, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Rick, take us from chapter 13, verse 10 to the end of the chapter.
And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of the Ardennes, that it was well watered everywhere, before Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Amorah, like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Mitzrayim, as you go toward Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the plain of the Ardennes, and Lot moved east. Thus they separated from each other. Avram dwelling in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelling in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were evil, and sinned before Yahweh, exceedingly so. And after Lot had separated from him, Yahweh said to Avram, now lift up your eyes, and look from the place where you are, northward and southward, and eastward and westward, for all the land which you see I shall give to you and your seed forever. And I shall make your seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could count the dust of the earth, then your seed also could be counted. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. So Avram moved his tent, and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are on Hebron, and built a slaughter place there to Yahweh.
Amen. Amen. All right, Sarah Beth. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sarah Beth, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, take us now to chapter 14, reading verses 1 through 12.
And it came to be in the days of Amraphel, sovereign of Shinar, Archon, sovereign of Elazar, Kadesh Laomer, sovereign of Eliam, and Tetzel, sovereign of Goyim, that they fought against Baar, sovereign of Sodom, Birsha, sovereign of Amorah, Shiva, sovereign of Admah, Shembevir, sovereign of Ziom, and the sovereign of Bela, that is Zahor. All these joined together in the valley of Sidom, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year Kedorlaomer and the sovereigns that were with him came and smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Kenarim, and the Zuim in Cham, and the Emets in Shiva, Kiryatayim, and the Horites in their mountain of Seir, as far as El Paran, that is, by the wilderness. And they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is, Kadesh, and smote all the countries of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in Chetzon Timar, and the sovereign of Sidom, and the sovereign of Amorah, and the sovereign of Admah, and the sovereign of Zidbayom, and the sovereign of Bela, that is Tzahor, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Sidom against Kedorlaomer, the sovereign of Elam, and Tidal, sovereign of Goyam, and Amraphel, sovereign of Shinar, and Arok, sovereign of Eltzor, 4 sovereigns against 5. And the valley of Sidom had many tar pits, and the sovereigns of Sodom and Amorah fled and fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Amorah, and all their food, and went away. And they took Lot, Avram's brother, son who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and left.
Amen. Amen. Okay, next up, Shannon. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Shannon, who's come upon Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Shannon's going to take us now from verse 13 to the end of the chapter.
And one who had escaped came and informed Abram, the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the timber trees of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and brother of Aner, and they had a covenant with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he and his servants divided against them by night, and struck them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is on the left of Damascus. So he brought back all the goods, and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. And after his return from striking of Kedorlaomer, and the sovereigns who were with him, the sovereign of Sidom came out to meet him at the valley of Shaweh, that is, the sovereign's valley, and Melchizedek, sovereign of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. Now he was the priest of the Most High El. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High El, possessor of the heavens and the earth. And blessed be the Most High El, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him 1/10 of all. And the sovereign of Sidom said to Abram, Give me the people and take the goods for yourself. And Abram said to the sovereign of Sidom, I have lifted my hand to Yahweh, the Most High El, the possessor of the heavens and the earth, not to take a thread or a sandal strap or whatever is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. Accept only what the young men have eaten and the portion of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them take their portion.
Amen. Thank you, Shannon. Okay, Shira. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Shira, who's come upon Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Shira's going to take us into chapter 15 and read verses 1 through 11.
After these events, the word of Yahweh came to Avram in a vision, saying, Do not be afraid, Avram. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great. And Avram said, Master Yahweh, what would you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? And Avram said, See, you have given me no seed, and see, one born in my house is my heir. And see, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, This one is not your heir, but he who comes from your own body is your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look now toward the heavens and count the stars, if you are able to count them. And he said to him, So are your seed. And he believed in Yahweh, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. And he said to him, I am Yahweh, who brought you out of Ur-Kasdim to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Master Yahweh, whereby do I know that I possess it? And he said to him, Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, and a 3-year-old female goat, and a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took all these to him, and cut them in the middle, and placed each half opposite the other. But he did not cut the birds. And the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, and Avram drove them away.
Amen. Okay. Excuse me. Trisha? He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Trisha, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Trisha's going to take us now from verse 12 to the end of chapter 15.
And it came to be, when the sun was going down, and a deep sleep fell upon Abram, that see, a frightening great darkness fell upon him. And he said to Abram, know for certain that your seed are to be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. But the nation whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you are to go to your fathers in peace. You are to be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the crookedness of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to be, when the sun went down and it was dark, that see, a smoking oven and a burning torch passing between these pieces. On the same day Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given this land to your seed, from the river of Mitzrayim to the great river, the river Euphrates. With the Quenite and the Quenizite and the Cutamite and the Hittite and the Pezerite and the Rephaim and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Girgashite and the Jebusite.
Amen. Easy for you to say.
Must be more names.
No, you're okay. All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Steve, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us into chapter 16 and read verses 1 through 8.
All right. And Sarai, Abraham's wife, had bore him no child, and she had a Mitzrim female servant who was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abraham, see, Yahweh has kept me from bearing children. Please go into my female servant. It might be that I built up by her. And Abraham listened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her female servant, the Mitzrim, and gave her to her husband, and Abraham's to be his wife. After Abram dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said to Abraham, my wrong be upon you. I gave a female servant into your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. Let Yahweh judge between you and me. And Abraham said to Sarah, see, your female servant is your hand. Do to her what is good in your eyes. And Sarah treated her harshly, and she fled from her presence. And the messenger of Yahweh found her by the spring of the water in the wilderness, by the spring of the way of Sur. And he said to Hagar, Sarah's female servant, where have you come from, and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of Sarah, my mistress.
Amen. Amen. Okay. And I do have room for one more before the last one, so anybody else wants to grab a seat? Because I've got you and then two more. So I do have one more spot. Oh, Manny wants to come up. Okay. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Michelle, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Michelle's going to take us now from verse 9 to the end of chapter 16.
And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, return to your mistress and humble yourself under her hand. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, I am going to increase your seed greatly, too numerous to be counted. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, see, you are conceiving and bearing a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahweh has heard your affliction. And he is to be a wild man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and dwell over against all his brothers. And she called the name of Yahweh, who spoke to her, "You are the El who sees." For she said, "Even here have I seen after him who sees me." That is why the well was called Be'er Lachai Ro'oi. See, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son whom Hagar bore Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram.
All right, thank you. Okay, Manny. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless man who has come to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Manny, you're going to take us now to chapter 17 and read verses 1 through 14.
And it came to be when Abram was 99 years old that Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am El Shaddai, walk before me and be perfect. And I give my covenant between me and you, and shall greatly increase you." And Abram fell on his face, and Elohim spoke with him, saying, "As for me, look, my covenant is with you, and you shall become a father of many nations. And no longer is your name called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham, because I shall make you a father of many nations. And I shall make you exceedingly fruitful, and make nations of you, and sovereigns shall come from you. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be Elohim to you and your seed after you. And I shall give to you and your seed and after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession. And I shall be their Elohim." And Elohim said to Abram, "As for you, guard my covenant and your seed after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you guard between me and you and your seed after you. Every male child among you is to be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall become a sign of the covenant between me and you. And a son of 8 days is circumcised by you, every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house or bought with silver from any foreigner who is not of your seed. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your silver has to be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And an uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant."
Amen. Okay, Rabbi Tom. You can just pull right up to here. That should probably be good enough. There we go. You got him? All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rabbi Tom, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, chapter 17, verse 15 to the end of the chapter.
And Elohim said to Abraham, "As for Sarah, your wife, do not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name. And I shall bless her, and also give you a son by her. And I shall bless her, and she shall become nations. Sovereigns of people are to be from her." And Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "Is a child born to a man who is 100 years old? Or is Sarah, who is 90 years old, to bear a child?" And Abraham said to Elohim, "Oh, let Ishmael live before you." And Elohim said, "No, Sarah, your wife, is truly bearing a son to you, and you shall call his name Yitzhak. And I shall establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. See, I shall bless him, and shall make him fruitful, and greatly increase him. And he is to bring forth 12 princes, and I shall make him a great nation. But my covenant I establish with Isaac, whom Sarah is to bear to you at this appointed time next year. And when he had ended speaking with him, Elohim went up from Avraham. And Avraham took Ishmael his son, and all those born in his house, and all those bought with his silver, every male among the men of Avraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that same day, as Elohim told him. And Avraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Avraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised that same day. And all the men of his house, born in the house, or bought with silver from a foreigner, were circumcised with him.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Rabbi Tom. Appreciate that. Thank you to all the readers. Let me go ahead and get this mic stand put back. All right, so again, thank you to all the readers. So the traditional blessing after the reading. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh, giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. Okay. Just a reminder for those of you that are online, how many we got right now? 256, that we do have services live streamed every Shabbat at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. 1:15 is when we start Eastern time. And by the way, praise to all of you that successfully navigated the time change over the weekend. I'm sure that some of us still have had glitches. That clock is still wrong, so that's okay. So we still have some clocks that we're dealing with. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and discuss the Torah portion. So if you've got a comment or question, you can raise your hand. If you're here locally, Steve Waffle will walk around with the mic. If you're online, then Mandy will be watching that and taking care of that from online. All right, so who wants to go first? Okay, Mr. Steve, go first.
Okay, for Genesis 12:2, for me, this tells me it's a prime example of how we must do in order to receive the promises of our fathers.
Okay. All right, because after he tells Abram to go, go yourself out of the land, he says, if you go and do what I tell you to do, I'm going to make you a great nation. Okay. Who's next? Okay, Rabbi Tom's got his hand up. You can bring it around back to him.
Thank you. There's a lot to think about in this very first part of this Parsha. And I was wondering why Yahweh chose Abraham out of all the people that were living in his land. And then why did he choose us, every one of us here? I mean, we're really nobody special. But for some reason, he picked every one of us who are here or who are online. He called us. And then we have an advantage over Abraham because Abraham was told to go to a place that Yahweh would show him. He didn't know where he was going. We knew where we were going when he called us here to Cleveland or wherever we're supposed to be. And also, Yahweh never gave Abraham a reason for leaving his land. He just told him to go. And he says, I'll bless you. So there was a command, And he said this will be followed up with blessings, but he never gave him a reason. That's something to ponder.
Amen. Okay, so I'm going to use, first of all, I'm going to disagree with some of the things you said, but I think it's a very powerful, and this is disagreeing in the way you would normally think I'm going to disagree. I agree 100% with what you said, but there's actually, on a deeper level, I'm going to disagree completely in that, A, we are all asked to go someplace he hasn't shown us, because a lot of you understood that, okay, we're going into the kingdom, but you don't understand what that looks like. So you didn't know how your family really was going to react. You didn't know how life was really going to be. He asked you to go someplace you really didn't know what it looked like. So in some ways, we're exactly like Abraham. Yes, we have the advantage that he didn't have is that we have the whole story laid out in front of us. He was right at the beginning of the story pretty much, okay? So we have some absolute advantages. But I also would say that, you know, when he said, I'm going to send you someplace without telling you where it is, and then Rabbi Tom mentioned, and he didn't tell him why, you know what? How many of you have struggled and still struggle with some of the things Yahweh asks you to do and he doesn't tell you why? I get lots of phone calls. Rabbi Tom, you get lots of halakha questions in the men's group. A lot of times people want to understand, but I don't understand why. Why do we do this and don't do that? Why do we do this and don't do that? Okay? As a matter of fact, you know, the 4 questions that get asked at Passover, why is this night different? Why do we do this? Why? It's like little children. Isn't that what the little children always ask? Why? What's this? Why that? How come? Okay? So then in a very real way, yes, I agree with Rabbi Tom 100%. We have advantages for those 2 reasons. But also in a very real way, we're exactly the same. Okay, and so I appreciate you saying it because it gave me the opportunity to say those 2 things. And it really is something I probably don't think I've ever said before because nobody really brought it up that way before. But I think it's really good that you did because it's good for us to see that, yes, a lot of what you see in Scripture, we're going to have advantages because we have the story in front of us. But let's not forget that we're really not so different. Okay? Abraham didn't know why he was picked. We don't know why we're picked. Abraham didn't know why Abraham didn't understand why he was told to leave and go where he was going and everything. We don't understand why he asked us to do what we're asked to do. He was asked to go someplace. He didn't know where he was going. You're being asked to go someplace. You really don't know where you're going. In other words, you really don't know what it's going to look like, what the journey's going to be like, what it's going to entail, what it's going to take to do the things that are required to go on the journey. So we can really appreciate that, you know, while we hold Abraham up as well we should in this really high regard, are we really so different in what he expects from us? Because aren't we also supposed to be children of promise? We're told that like Abraham, we can be children of promise, or Abraham's children. So if he was asked to, then we should look in our own lives to see where we're asked to do the same things, because that's what brings us to the same place where we become those that are believing in what Yahweh said. Okay? And actually, you know what? I had a really interesting, strange thought. And it may be just a play on the Hebrew. It may be the way that the Hebrew grammar works. But you know, in verse 6 of chapter 15, when it says, after Abram's given the promises one more time and told that Eliezer is not going to be the heir, it says, like the stars of the heaven, etc., his seed is going to be. And it says that he believed in Yahweh and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. What if Abraham was reckoning it to Yahweh that this was right? That he understood that this was righteous and right, not just the other way around. We always want to read it the way that Yahweh reckoned it to Abraham as righteousness. What about Abraham reckoning it? Because we just see there's no commas in the Hebrew. There's no syntax in the Hebrew. Of course, the he and those parts are a part of the other word. And now we have to decide who the verb is describing or who's the action and who's happening. I think Abraham also, we could take this the other way and say, he realized, as he believed in Yahweh, that what Yahweh said was right, that it was right to believe Yahweh, that it was righteous to understand that Yahweh said, no, Eliezer is not going to be your heir. One that's actually of your seed through Sarah will be your heir. Okay? So very, very different. And because I'm reading the verse and I'm going, well, we assume because somebody put a capital H in front of that he. Of course, there are no capital H's in the Hebrew. All right? As a matter of fact, the he part, is going to be, we have to look at the way the Hebrew is worded there, but I'm just saying is, what if it can go either way or both ways? It doesn't damage the understanding at all. It may actually enhance it. Okay? That part of what Abram and we as children of Abraham, okay, because his name wasn't changed at this point yet, part of what he did was he recognized that what Yahweh does and says is righteous. And so it says here, and he believed in Yahweh and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. And so, those in the Christian mainstream who want to use that as a way to say, see, he didn't actually do anything, he just believed. Maybe it doesn't say what they think it says. I definitely don't think it says what they think it says because, even Hebrews 11 tells us that Abraham's belief turned into an action. By belief, Abraham did. By belief, Noah did. By belief, Sarah did. By belief, they did. Okay? It's a completely consistent pattern all through Hebrews 11. All right, so your belief chapter. All right, just so you kind of have that playing out. Anyway, just wanted to kind of bring that out there because I thought that was a good point. Okay, who's next? Okay, Sarah Beth.
Thank you, Rabbi. I got my nugget for the night.
There you go. I'd like to get those out of the way up front.
Thank you. To add to what you and Rabbi Tom said, when Rabbi Tom was talking about it and then when you were talking about it, no, he didn't give him a reason, but could it be an end that the reason was the blessing? That was the reason?
Well, look, the reason that Yahweh does all things is because it all works together for his purpose. Now, in doing so, his purpose is to bless. That is his purpose, is to bless. And so when he told Abraham or Abram to get up and leave, okay, Abram didn't understand why, but he should have understood and eventually grew to understand that doing what Yahweh says is to receive blessing. Even if you can't see it before you do it, if you don't understand it before you do it. But the whole point is that the Creator's purpose is to bless his creation, but he expects the creation to have a certain level, a certain type and nature of a relationship with him in which we trust and obey and believe what he says. And what are we trusting? That if we do it, it brings blessing. This is the simplicity of the whole point. Now, we like Abram, Isaac, Jacob, along the way, notice he does certain things with them. Number one, he asks them to do things they don't understand and can't see necessarily. Number two, he reminds them over and over again and encourages them that there's a blessing. We see this especially then when we finally get to Moses. If you obey and do everything I say, I'll take you as my people. And by the way, you will receive all of these blessings. And so he enumerates these things for them. Because you have to wonder, as you read through just these few chapters, multiple times Yahweh says to Abram, I will do these things for you and your seed. My purpose is to bless. But not just anybody, and not just everybody, but those that would. Because remember, he's going to be the father of many, and the Hebrew would be their goyim. Gentiles, nations. Okay, so he's not the father of just the Jews. Matter of fact, we don't get a Jew for several generations. You've got to go through Isaac and then Jacob and then Judah finally. Okay? But he's going to be the father of many nations. Because through him and his seed, everyone will learn how to receive blessing. And that's the whole point of existence, is that the Creator who has purposed it to have beings to bless, and in doing so, he instructs us in how to receive those blessings. What a beautiful simplicity and what a beautiful picture. Amen? And so that's why sometimes you may wonder, why does he have to tell Abram over and over again, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, like the sand in the sea, like the stars in the heavens, and blah, 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 because you know what? Like everybody, we have our weak moments and our doubting moments and our moments when we don't get it, we don't understand, and we need encouragement. Abram was human. He had his weak moments and his doubting moments. Yeah, he believed and was counted righteous, so whatever way you want to read that verse. But just because he believed didn't mean he didn't have those moments where he was wondering what in the world's going on here. Otherwise, would Yahweh feel the need to remind Abram of promises if Abram didn't have those moments? It's also there for us, right, as examples, because we have those moments. Every one of us has those, I don't know that I get this, or I don't know if I understand the process here, or I don't think I can make it. See, this is a constant encouragement to Abram. You can make this, and you will make this, and your seed, and generationally, is going to be a blessing. Now, there are going to be some hiccups, because it's going to say that you're going to serve a nation, and you're going to be there, and you got this whole 400-year little thing. And by the way, we don't know when the 400-year count starts. It could have started, I don't remember how generationally this works, it could have started right there when he told it to him. Because we only have a couple of generations in Egypt. It doesn't go 400 years. When you consider when it starts naming the genealogies, and you get to Moses' parents pretty quickly, and then their parents, and it goes back to right before they were in Egypt. So you wonder, where the count actually starts. And I've not done the research. I'm sure a lot of people out there think, well, I got the answers and I've done the research. Well, good for you. I'm glad you figured it out. It's not the point. The point is that he tells us the good stuff, but he also tells us, and there's going to be challenging moments. And yes, your seed ultimately will get there. But there will be a few bumps in the road. Take that into the metaphor for your life. Ultimately, you probably will get there. If you endure until the end, you cling, cleave, and hold fast, if you fear Yahweh, all the names of all the titles, all the teachings. Okay? We could probably make a teaching just taking the titles of the teachings. There's a teaching for you. All right? And if you would do those things, you'll receive the crown of life. But there'll be those bumps in the road. There'll be those hiccups. Where you're going to have those moments where somebody, maybe it's me from the microphone, maybe it's one of you to each other, will remind you, maybe just reading this verse when you were reading the Torah portion to yourself, where it reminded you, oh, wait a minute, he made these promises. And it becomes important when you get to Moses, because Moses says, by the way, Moshe, and all you Israelites, you're not getting this blessing right now because of anything you geniuses did. This is because I made a promise to your forefathers, to Avram, to Yitzchak, to Yaakov. And we need to, by the way, own that same thing. We don't get all this good stuff because we're so special, as Rabbi Tom pointed out. We're extremely special, but no more than anybody else. He made you, so you're special. But we're not special in a unique way beyond other people sitting right next to us in the stores or in the malls or doing our jobs or whatever we're doing. But he's given us what we got because of promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why he picked them? He knows why he picked them. We're just glad he did, and he shows us how we could be a part of it. Amen? Amen. Who's next? Okay, Mr. Rick.
Yes. It is said that, Avram was schooled in Noah's school, the Melchizedekian school of Noah and Shem, and that line of teaching and instruction. So he would have already had a trusting relationship with Yahweh where, Yahweh would have done things for him to remember what he had done for him through that time period. So therefore the why would be because I said so, and because I taught you this and I taught you that and I did this and I did that. Though we don't have it written, isn't it understood that there was a relationship there? So whatever Yahweh said to do, yeah, I'll do.
Okay. The only challenging part is in the beginning when you said that he already had a trusting relationship. He trusted him enough because he believed him. I don't know that he had enough experiences that generally builds trust through experience. He knew about Yahweh. He wasn't surprised when Yahweh talked to him, who it was that was talking to him. And he'd seen enough and heard enough that he should trust. But we're seeing that through his own experiences, he's developing that relationship. Because there are moments where he's like going, what's going on here? And he clearly was not trusting. He had his moments where he panicked a little bit, his moment with Sarah calling her sister instead of trusting. There were just moments where he clearly was not. But over time, he was learning to trust. Okay, so trust takes time through relationship. But he had a relationship, at least the beginnings of one, before he said, Avram, I want you to get up and go. So I'll agree with everything you said up to that point. It's just not clear that he had, at that point, a whole trusting relationship. He trusted enough to obey. Okay, when he said, get up and go. All right? So I believe if Yahweh had said to him, look, when you go to Egypt, no problem saying she's your wife, you don't have to pretend or hide anything, he'd have obeyed. There was no interaction prior to that. Okay? So he didn't trust him in all of those things all the way through the journey. He had his weak moments and whatever it was, just like anybody else. Okay, based on he understood the culture of the time. Because a king, at the time, often had people at the gate to say, she looks really pretty. If you see one that looks pretty, you go ahead and grab her. If she's married, go ahead and kill the husband, and then she can become and be mine. If she's related and has her brother with him or another family member, treat them really nicely and give them, abundance, and then just bring her to me. So he may have had that fear that he would have been killed. He knew Sarah was very beautiful, and he understood the culture of the times of where he lived as he was traveling. But does that show any lack of trust in Yahweh? On some levels it does. I'm not trying to attack Abram at all, but this is where he was in that part of his relationship. It was a developing relationship over time. Okay? So over time, he made these decisions as he came to walk with his Elohim. And same with you. You're going to make much better decisions, hopefully, next year and the year after than you did 2 years ago or 5 years ago, assuming you've been doing this, let's say, for 5 years, okay, or 10 years. Well, you're going to always hopefully do better after a journey with him than you would have at the beginning of the journey with him, because now you know him better, you understand him better, you understand and trust him, and see his hand in those challenging moments better. So we have less panic, less weak moments, etc. Amen? Okay, next, Shira.
Thank you, Rabbi. That is really encouraging. I also was thinking about what you're saying, that Avraham, in spite of the fact that he was just developing his relationship and he was a little shaky about trusting Yahweh, in both with King Abimelech and Pharaoh, he walked off with a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so you can see Yahweh, instead of punishing him, Yahweh had compassion on where Abraham was at, understood that he was pioneering something, and like he does with us so many times, he has so much compassion on our ignorance, and he shows us blessings so that we can learn to trust him.
There's a big difference between Moses speak to the rock and Moses smacking it, and Avram not having any instruction and just making a somewhat panicked decision. So he's not going to be punished for a disobedience, because that's what brings the punishment, is the disobedience. Okay? Here is in his developing of a relationship, he was left on his own, didn't know what to do, he didn't have a hotline to call to his rabbi or his teacher or Melchizedek at that point and say, I don't know what to do here. I happen to be traveling, don't have a cell phone, don't have a way to talk to anybody, and I'm going into Egypt. I don't know what to do. And Avimelech may not actually be the person's name. It may just mean that he was the son of the king. Okay? And so, or the father of, it says the father, Avimelech, the father of the king. So there could be something going on here that really, because you see the same thing with Isaac, and he runs into, again, Abimelech or Avimelech. Okay? And so you have these things that we're not sure who the person really was and if it had to do with a name or a title, but the point was, under those circumstances, under those conditions, you can see, yes, he's being blessed, not because, and I want to make sure we're not taking the wrong thing out of it, not because he disobeyed something, but in his ignorance, Abba decided to bless him, but in his ignorance of not, and he wasn't disobeying anything. He was just working with the culture and his understanding as he understood it at that point. Okay? Now, in his intervention, Yahweh says to the king, or the father of the king, whoever he was, and said, he inspired him to know this is not that man's sister, it's his wife. Which you would think under normal circumstances wouldn't make any difference really to the king. But whatever guidance, inspiration, or dream he had to tell him that scared him enough to say, no, here, you take her and take all your stuff I gave you. He didn't even ask for it back. He says, just go. Because he could have said, you tricked me. You leave all that stuff and just hit town. You're out of here. Could have killed him anyway, just took in his wife. I mean, a lot of things he could have done. He was either the king or the father of the king, but he had authority. Yet you see that Yahweh intervened. Now that's what we have to trust in while we are walking in our limited understanding and our ignorance, that provided we're doing things out of ignorance, not out of disobedience, that he might still bless us and cover us while we are journeying forward. Amen? Okay, Shira.
Oh, Maine. Okay, this week I found an interesting connection. I wanted to know what you might think about this. In chapter 15, it kind of goes along with what we're talking about, because we're Abraham's seed.
Yep.
And so he's asking Yahweh, okay, how do I really know that you're going to give me this land? And Yahweh makes a covenant specifically regarding the possession of the land. He tells Abraham exactly what animals to slaughter and the whole thing. So Abraham does everything he says. And in verse 11, the birds of prey come down and try to eat and defile the sign of the covenant. And I connected it in Matthew 13 when Yeshua gives us the parable of the soils. There's one kind of situation where the seed, the word, the birds of prey, is the wicked one trying to snatch the word being sown. And that is the seed falling by the wayside. And I got the picture that you always paint for us. If you stay on the path and don't be off to one side or the other, disobeying or trying to fudge on your obedience, you'll be protected. And I saw that Abraham had the ability to keep the birds of prey off of the covenant sacrifice.
Amen.
But if I'm off the path, I am not going to be able to, the birds of prey are going to be able to start snatching truth out of my heart.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. I had a couple of questions about what you were saying, because throughout history, like, let's say during the Holocaust, when people were hiding, so could it be that, I was thinking, well, his family, the family business was making idols, am I correct? And he was going against that by coming out from under that. I mean, Yah was calling him out from that. Is it possible along the way that he asked, it's not recorded? Or I also heard that Sarai was actually his sister as well as his wife.
Well, there are some relational things because he goes to a family member to get Sarah. Okay, so there is a relative relationship there. But the point was, the reason for him doing that instead of saying his wife is because of what culturally would have happened. Right. Now, as far as the idols and everything else, this is stuff we get from extra biblical, stuff, like the book of Jasher, etc. Okay. And so that may or may not be true. It looks like, his father had done a bunch of work with Nimrod and had done things with idol making and that kind of stuff. Okay. And from those books, it looks like Abraham was never all that excited about that and had a problem with it. Because, of course, he was being, according to that book, raised by his, forefathers, like Noah. Noah was training him. I was going to say great-grand. I don't know how many generations, like off the top of my head, it gets back to Noah. But he was being instructed by Noah according to that source. So you can understand that he would not have been interested in the idol stuff that maybe Terah was doing. Okay. Right. Okay. The lesson for us It's still that same lesson, okay? Are we going to, trust and obey in the face of being immersed in a world that we are not of the world, but we're in it? And how do we do that, okay? And that brings up actually from verse 1 of the whole thing to, the first couple of verses when he says, go, and Abraham, it says Abraham left. Now, we do have verses in the Brit Hadashah that talks about, in the New Testament, it talks about counting the cost. Who builds a house without figuring out what it's going to cost? Well, Abraham was told, get up and go. And so there wasn't a whole lot to count the cost of. He said, what's the cost of not obeying? Sometimes you got to count the cost of not obeying. So you have to weigh the whole thing. In other words, don't go into this thing, with your eyes half closed and you really don't know what's happening. You got to know when you make your decision, yes, it may cost you. Yeshua tells you it may cost you mother, father, sister, brother, friends, etc. Go into this with your eyes open. Don't act all shocked. I get people calling me every week. If you're online now, I'm not picking on you. Every week, somebody will call me up, and they're all upset because their family members are not happy with their choice to now leave their churches and stop doing Christmas, and now they're eating different. And I'm like, but it tells you that's going to happen. That doesn't mean you should like it. I mean, it's not fun for anybody. But you knew this. Okay, he told you this would happen. So, Abram just didn't hesitate. And so a lot of you have made decisions like that, and that's why you're in Cleveland. Not saying that everybody needs to move here, but I know a lot of you, realized that you had a call, and that call was that you needed to be where you had the fellowship and the family, or your children needed fellowship and family. And you were like, well, one way or the other, I will find work, I will do what needs to happen, and I'll get this to work out. And some of you came here without all those things lined up, and they got lined up once you got here. Some of you are still trusting in some of those things to get lined up.
Amen.
But they will get lined up. Everybody eventually, when they got here, got things lined up. But that's first the obedience. Okay, if he's sending you, you got to go. But, you can keep talking that way. And I'm not saying that means about just coming here. Whatever it is in your life, you may need to tell your boss, I can't work Saturday, and you'll get a new job. And maybe it won't be the greatest job of all time. Maybe the greatest job of all time is 2 jobs away. Or 3 jobs away. Okay, it may not be the one that you think, but you know what? The one that he gives you, at least will pay the bills till you get to the one you're supposed to have.
Amen.
Look at all the stops Abram had to have before he ended up in the land. And some of the parts of his journey. Look at the long journey Joseph had to go through before he ended up second in command to everybody. Okay, he had to end up in jail, he had to end up a slave. So the journey doesn't always look, feel, and it doesn't actually, it's not actually a blessing in its actuality for you at times, leading to the place where it is the blessing. Okay, but you have to recognize that that's part of being in the world while you're making the journey. But it's also the test to see, are you serious? Because you got a lot of friends going, are you serious? And you're like, yes, I'm serious. Well, Yahweh wants to know if you're serious.
Amen.
How serious is your commitment? Well, how's he going to know if he doesn't put it to the test? A lot of you understand this because you're married at this point and you've got struggles in marriages. I have to tell you that there seems to be a magic number. You get about 10 to 15 years into something, and we'll figure out if you're really married. Because if that's the point where you start to wonder, can I keep doing this? At 10, 15, 20 years in, because either you've already adjusted to each other or you haven't. And if you haven't, you're going to be tested. And then you're going to have to figure out, am I ready to adjust now, or are we just going to adjust away? Everything has to get tested. All relationships get tested. You and your children, you and your spouse, you and your parents, you and your Creator. All relationships have to go through tests. Go back and listen to the baptism of fire teaching. If you're listening online, this has nothing to do with charismatic or Assemblies of God or tongue speaking. It has to do with understanding testing by fire. Because that's what the phrase was being used to do. It had nothing to do with any other spiritualized gifting of any sort. Baptism of water was washing you clean. Baptism of spirit is instructing you in what to do. And the baptism of fire tests to see how far you've come. Very simple. Okay? And so we are told throughout Scripture, consistently, that you will be tested to see what sort of work you are. That's what Abba does with all works. He has to put them through the fire to see what kind of work it is. You build the house, did you build it on a rock? Did you build it on the sand? Did you build it with shoddy construction? Did you build it solid and with everything measured properly? What did you do? Okay, so yes, it's going to be those moments. But that's part of what you signed on for. Remember, after he tells Abram, notice this, after he tells Abram 3 or 4 times in here, you are going to be all these wonderful things, then something challenging all of a sudden shows up. Not like the next second, but close. Okay, I gave you all these promises. I told you all this wonderful stuff's going to happen. Now let's see how you handle when it goes bad for 5 minutes. That's our lives. And then he reminds him again, by the way, I didn't forget. I still promise you it's still going to be like the sand of the seas, etc., etc. Oh, and guess what? Then something challenging happens. You know, Lot gets captured. Kings are battling and doing these things. Or he ends up in Egypt and the whole thing with his wife, the sister thing, or whatever. Things happen. You know, there's a famine in the land and he has to go look through. I mean, all these things happen after he's told how wonderful everything's going to be. And then Yahweh reminds him, I didn't forget. You're still going to have all that stuff. It's just not a straight line from where you are to the blessings. There are potholes and traps and all kinds of, issues along the way. Okay, what else you got?
I just wanted to say that I'm so grateful for your teaching on the fear of Yahweh, and he's really bringing that to bear in my life as I'm trying to negotiate getting into community, getting job, having a car that works, etc., and working out differences with brothers and sisters, and having my speech and what I share with people come under, Yah showing me. And so the fear has really increased to, as you have said, if you have a correct fear of Yahweh, then you'll fear no man, because you'll be on that path that Shira, in the path that you teach us. And then I had one other comment.
And not just no man, but also no circumstance.
Right. Amen. And the other thing was I wanted to thank you for the teaching you started about darkness and light. And because when Shira was alluding to the covenant sacrifice, and it, I don't, I'm going to paraphrase, please forgive me.
It's okay.
When Abraham, when a darkness came upon him.
Yes.
If you could allude to that, but I said, that's what, that darkness, and it was like what you had said before in your examples, and yet that out of that darkness was coming this beautiful covenant.
Right.
And so thank you for that.
Okay, so remember, darkness is as a starting point that things get birthed out of. It's something that hides to be revealed, and those things are happening in here. It's a separator. So a lot of those different elements are happening here with Abram, with the covenant of the pieces. Okay, absolutely. But also let's keep in mind when we talk about the fear of Yahweh, we talk about the things happening here. We know where Abram ends up. So it doesn't sound as scary when Yahweh, we get excited about, look, Yahweh's calling him and telling him, go, I'm going to take you to this great place. Well, Abram had no idea. See, it's that fear of the unknown. It's that there are things that happen in your life that you are not wrong to see as scary if you're looking through it through the normal worldly eyes. So they seem scary. Okay? I used to teach swimming at one point, including people who've never had dove before. So diving the first time for almost everybody seems to be the scary thing, because you're afraid you're going to land on your face, or you're going to get water up your nose and choke, or whatever it is, you're going to belly flop. People are afraid to dive. But you know what? After they've done it for a while, that fear isn't even a thought. What changed? You have a reality that you now have to show you that fear was absolutely a false evidence that appeared real, that it was unfounded. But it was very real before you had the experience to show you that it was an unfounded fear. It was a baseless fear. Okay? Because probably you also at some point landed on your face or on your belly and realized that didn't kill you either. So again, it was a baseless fear. I mean, yes, it wasn't fun, but it didn't, do any permanent damage. And actually, if you were a teenage boy, you learned to do it on purpose because it made everybody laugh and whatever. So not only wasn't it something that was a fearful thing, but it became quite entertaining and something you would do on purpose to belly flop. Okay? So, but the point was, it was scary to you. Leaving your church may have been scary at some point. Leaving friends and family may have been scary at some point. Leaving your job, leaving where you live to move here or whatever, Yahweh, wherever he sends you. These are all things that will absolutely, on a worldly level, on a fleshly level, be scary unless you fear Yahweh. Then you won't have any fear. Because wherever you go, wherever you end up, he'll figure out a way, if you mess it up, to use it to his purposes and get you back on track. You can derail all that, though, because you will beat yourself up. You'll get all depressed. You'll be all focused and all that, instead of realizing, okay, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe it was me wanting to go here or go there. That's okay. I can get on my knees, repent of that, and ask Abba, okay, show me where I need to go now. From wherever you go, he can still get you where you need to go, as long as you keep focusing on him. Don't quit. Don't, spend most of your time in self, just beating yourself up, etc. Okay? And so it's the fear part. And we are a world overrun, completely drowning in fear. Okay, insecurities, self-worth issues, paranoia, fear of success, fear of failure. We're afraid of everything and everybody except him. So the fear of Yahweh teaching has always been the core of my teachings, for most of the years that I've taught. It's usually the first one I used to always recommend to everybody because we've done other things I think maybe you could even do first, but if you don't figure the fear of Yahweh out, none of the other stuff's going to matter anyway. I mean, it's the first step. You must figure this out. And it's the only way to end up eventually in a place of shalom. Okay? I don't think there's any doubt that we could see that Avram had shalom in his decision. Now, he didn't have shalom always. He was a little nervous when he showed up there with Abimelech, But he had shalom when Yahweh said, do this or do that. Yahweh said, do this. He just did what he said. Had total peace. Okay? Yahweh said, you're going to have a baby. Well, Sarah's going to think it's funny, but Avram was like, okay. It is what it is. Right? He had peace. He didn't necessarily just think that, he was happy to have this one or that one, how things were going to go, but he had his peace. We don't see him panicking and fearful about it. All right? Now we see Sarah panic and she pushes Hagar on him. We see Rachel and Leah panic and push their handmaidens on Jacob. We see people panicking on a regular enough basis. And not just the ladies, we see plenty of guys panicking as well. I mean, Esau's having a complete meltdown because he's hungry. Big, strong, man of war, hunter, give up everything for an empty belly. This is emotion-driven stupidity, right? Because our focus ends up being just absolutely skewed by those emotions. You're going to have to find a way to get all that stuff, that negative, panicky, fearful, insecure, hypersensitive, whatever, under control. And trust him. He called you? Well, I don't know, maybe he didn't call you. If you think he called you, why do you don't trust him? I'm not to say he called you, didn't call you, but you think he did. I would think he did too. If you understand everything that we're reading and that I'm teaching you and that, that you didn't understand before, well, then he called you. But if you believe he called you, why don't you trust that? Doesn't matter what anybody else believes, because everybody else is going to attack you for it anyway. You believe he called you? Then walk like you believe he called you. See, that's really what's going on here with Abram when he says that he believed in what Yahweh said. Yahweh said, you are going to have... Now remember, he hadn't had any children at this point. Okay? He didn't have his child. I mean, he was still thinking Eliezer is going to be the heir. Yahweh says, no, one's going to come out of you. And he's like, oh, okay. And he believed him. Man's 100 years old, and he believed him, pretty much, just rounding things off here. All right, but he believed him. Well, no matter how old you are, how young you are, no matter what your situation is, he called you. Do you believe him? Because when he called you, he said to you, I believe you can do this. So do you believe him? Because he said you can do it. By calling you, by definition, that's him saying you can do it. So do you believe him? It's like him telling Abram you could have a baby. Telling Sarah you could have a baby. But I've been barren all this. So what? I just told you could have a baby. You believe me or not? Yahweh says, do you believe me? Well, he called you in your circumstance, everything that was whatever it was. That means you can do it from that point, unless you don't believe him. If you don't believe him, you're not going to make it. Because you're going to self-sabotage it and not do what you need to do. But do you believe him? Who's next? Okay, live stream.
Okay, Lady Di wants to know, Genesis 12:1. Yah told Avram to leave relatives and go to the land. Why did Lot go?
Okay, so he didn't say you can't take anybody with you. He said you need to just leave everybody and go do what you got to do no matter what they want you to do. Lot wanted to go with him. This is maybe like a favorite nephew, and they had a close relationship, and so, this was, he wanted to go. Also, you never know what Lot's situation was, where they lived, in that point, and he's like, I'm ready to go out and journey out and see the world and whatever, so he went with him. So he wasn't told not to take anybody with him. He said, you need to leave this place. But remember, in those days, we have it different than today. In those days, families all lived together like a clan, in almost like an entity unto itself when there was enough generations of it. Okay, so you had a little village, it was probably everybody related to each other pretty much. I mean, they had enough people doing all of the different things. So leaving your relatives was a big deal, all right? That was a big deal. And so he was told, look, you go ahead and leave your relatives, but it doesn't mean your relatives can't come with you, all right? Because there were those that went with Abraham. And it was not just Lot, but there were others as well. That he left with a good-sized little group of people with him. All right.
Okay, Evangeline.
Hold on. Oh, sorry. Sometimes as soon as I say it, he gives me another thing to say. He's saying leave the influence of the relatives behind. Okay? So that's why I had to interrupt, because that just sparked into my brain right at that moment. Okay? He says, go yourself out of your land from your influence of your relatives. Ooh. And by the way, when Lot no longer wanted to be under Abram's influence, what'd they do? They split. Abram said, fine, go do what you want. Wherever you go to the right, I'll go to the left. You go to the left, I'll go to the right. Okay, and by the way, that's because there could not be two authorities in the group. Lot decided, I can't be under your authority anymore. He says, fine, go. Do what you got to do. All right, go ahead.
That's good. Evangeline, chapter 12, verse 3. And I shall bless those who bless you and curse, ... Is that still in force today?
It probably has some level of effect as Yahweh decides to bring it into effect. It's not as the different, how do I want to put this? Those who are trying to figure out nationally who is receiving the blessings, like the British Israelism stuff, the U.S. and Britain Israelism stuff, which says, well, see, these are the groups that have been blessed, and so they're receiving these promises, and if they curse them, then it's somehow, so if you curse Britain or the U.S., so that part, I think, is shaky, okay? There may be something to it because a lot of Israel ended up in those two places, but I would be very careful and reluctant to point the finger and say, this is the promises to Abram, the blessing of the curse part, okay? I mean, I would think it would be much more visible descendants of Abram on some level. So those who curse you now, don't worry, Yahweh will take care of that. Those who bless you now, he'll take care of that too. And by the way, not immediately so that you necessarily get to see it. Okay, go ahead.
Robert Wyatt says in chapter 12, verse 7, land was given to Abram's seed. Abram then traveled through the land to end in Mitzrayim, left Mitzrayim in 1315, 17, and was given to Abraham, and then he settled there. Not sure if that was a question or a statement.
Well, it shows that he ends up in Mitzrayim, but I mean, there is a bunch of, because remember, we're dealing with is the scarcity of food in verse 10. Okay? As he was doing his traveling, there became a scarcity of food, and for whatever reason, the scarcity of food always ended up driving people to Egypt. All right? They had the Nile, and it was a breadbasket there, and it was fertile, and so this is where people ended up. All right? And we see this happening all the way through to Moses. Okay? We see Jacob and his family ends up, prior to Moses in Egypt for scarcity of food. We see this happen with Isaac. I mean, whenever there was a scarcity of food, for some reason they ended up. By the way, that's why they're told when they do leave Egypt with Moses, you are not to go back no matter what happens. Don't let the scarcity of food or some other thing drive you back, which is why Jeremiah came to really scold them quite harshly in the southern kingdom and saying, look, why are you thinking Egypt is going to save you? Okay, stop looking to Egypt for safety. Okay? All right, next.
Jonathan Thompson, any takeaways in Genesis 13, 5 through 17 that apply to our halacha on decision-making and problem resolve relating to waiting for information Abba has not shown us yet? Or does Avram's deal reflect more on his emunah?
Well, look, I mean, bottom line, what you see going on in 13, this is where they split Lot and Abram. What you see happening is that Abram, who was clearly the elder of the bunch, he was the head, he makes the decision. He sees their strife, he wants to settle the strife, there's a conflict going on, he calls Lot over and he says, look, I don't want there to be strife. There shouldn't be strife between us, so tell you what, there's not enough room for both of us right now. You've got a lot of people in herds, I've got a lot of people in herds, we've got issues going on, it's time to split. All right, so, but not only that, but because I have emunah, because I trust, I don't care which way you go. Abba's already got a way for me to go, I will be fine. You want to go left, I'll go right. You want to go right, I'll go left. It doesn't matter. Do what you want. And I guess what you also see happening here in the trust issue, it's not in the explicit understanding of the verses, but I'm guessing that what was happening is that Lot and his people were imposing themselves in a regular enough basis of, this is my area, this is my well, this is my this is my, they were trying to take whatever levels of authority, and that was causing strife. That's why he says, fine, here's your authority, go wherever you want, and I'll let you have the lead. You go this way, I'll go that way. No problem at all. Is that what you want? You want to be in charge? Fine, make a decision. Okay? And by the way, what does it show? When you step out from under the coverings decision, it doesn't usually go well ultimately. Lot ends up in trouble continuously. And who has to save him? Avram. Okay? Because sometimes you got to let the children out to make their own mistakes. You think you're so smart? Good, there's the door. I'll be hearing back from you. Tail between your legs, prodigal son. Okay? Prodigal son wasn't the first. You got Lot's pretty much the same thing. Except Lot never came back to realize that he was just too stubborn. He just would go out there and he would get all beat up and captured and everything. He'd go stay out there, and Sodom and Gomorrah gets completely destroyed, and he just doesn't get it. He's just stubborn. you know. Okay, what's next? So back, Jonathan asked a halakhic question. So yes, you know, you should seek not to have strife with or stride against leadership, and allow, Lot would have flourished quite nicely if he could have kept his group under control under Abram. That would have worked in everybody's best interest. Okay?
All right, Jonathan had another question too. Genesis 15, 10 through 12 and 17. Any Peshat, Remez, or Darash, or Sod for our halacha here concerning detail in a way he obeyed, or cutting and placing the birds, etc.? Anything in the context of light and darkness?
Okay, look, the parable of the pieces, lots of people have read lots of things into this. It's not so much a parable. I mean, it's an event, but everything is parable in the way that we're supposed to understand it. The covenant of the pieces, you could try to dig all kinds of stuff out of. I'm not going to do that here. It's not my area of study. But again, you know, when it talks about this, the main thing to glean out of it is that it's Yahweh that walks through. It's not both of them. So this is a unilateral covenant. So you only have the one passing through. Okay? You don't have Abram doing it as well. He's been put to sleep, and he's watching this in the vision, and he sees what looks like the fire going through. Okay, you have the oven and the torch. So you don't really have him participating, because this is a promise that Abram is being given that really he doesn't have anything to perform to get it. He's just, this is your promise. I have promised you, you're going to have this land, period. There's no if. Okay? So that's the emphasis here, is to show that there's no if. Okay? This isn't like the covenant at Sinai that says if. This is, I am promising you, your descendants will get that land. No ifs. Guaranteed, write it down, written in the blood of those animals, so to speak, okay? All right, next point.
Lauren had a question on that same 15, verse 10. Could you explain why the birds were not cut or split? No. And that's not a joke this time. I just can't explain it to you. I have no idea. I mean, I'm sure there's ways to study it out and find all kinds of, I don't know. Okay, Delana asks, chapter 15, 13 through 16, did the Israelites wander for 4 generations or 40 years? Can you explain how this works?
What verse?
15, chapter 15, 13 through 16.
Okay, everything about those two parts there have to do with when the clock starts, and it doesn't tell us, okay? Okay, it talks about 400 years. It also talks about in the 4th generation they shall return. The 4th generation from what point? Okay? So it just doesn't make it clear. Because generations, by the way, are not generally looked at as 100 years. So, so 4 generations wouldn't take you to 400 years. Okay, generations are much more often looked at as 70 and things like that. So, it's not so clear where the clock starts. He's just kind of giving us hints so that when it happens, we can look back and go, oh, that's what he was talking about. Okay?
Brianna Berkson had a comment earlier today. In Genesis 15:12, she noticed that Avram felt the great darkness, but after that, Yahweh gave him the covenant, a revealing.
Amen. Thank you. It's good to have my daughter on there. Good to see you, darling. Good insight. See, she was paying attention on Shabbat when we were talking about darkness and light.
Eventually, in chapter 15, 16, verse 16, for the crookedness of the Amorites is not yet complete. Does that mean that they really have to be so wicked for Yah to take their land from them?
No, I mean, okay, it's a really bad English translation phrasing in terms of the way we use our language today. He's saying, I've not finished what the Amorites are going to have brought on them. In other words, I've not completed rewarding them for their behavior. And so they will return to finish that process. Okay, it's not waiting on them to be more crooked. In other words, the recompense of their crookedness has not been completed. It's going to need a bigger nation than just Abraham and his descendants at this point. In the future, there will be a lot more of them, and they'll be able to do what they need to do to the Amorites. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So no, the Amorites were not being waited on to be worse or more crooked. Okay? The reaping and sowing that you got to remember, when they went into the land, as best we understand it, Israel was used as the instrument of Yahweh's recompense on peoples that had brought that upon themselves. A lot of them had ites at the end of their name. Okay? And so he's simply saying here that then in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the crookedness of the Amorites has not yet been completely dealt with. And so they'll return here to finish that process. Okay? Next.
Jordan Thompson had a question on chapter 16, verse 3. It says, Hagar was given to Avram as his wife. So why is the birth of his firstborn, Ishmael, not honored by Yah like Isaac was? Why did the mother matter this time?
Okay. What you see happening is, in chapter 15, he is told that he and Sarah are going to have the baby. He doesn't say it exactly that way, but it does say it exactly that way. Sarah, on the other hand, who understands this, is trying to force the issue. Now, Yahweh already understands the end from the beginning, so he understands how this will play out in the future as a part of his plan. To have Ishmael and his descendants, who we're still dealing with today, to be around. Okay? And so you got to understand that this is not what Yahweh said to Abram and Sarah before there was a Hagar and Ishmael problem. Okay, Sarah's forcing the issue. Right, so Sarah, Abram's wife, had borne him no child, and she had a Mitzrayite female servant named Hagar. So she's trying to force the issue. You got to remember that the previous chapter, though, he was told, Abram said, Master Yahweh, what would you give me, seeing I go childless? Then the heir of my house is Eliezer. He says, see, you've given me no seed. And Yahweh said, this one is not your heir, but he who comes from your own body is your heir. Now, at this point, he's with Sarah. Okay, he's not actually he's with Sarai. Okay, they hadn't had their names changed yet. Okay, but that's the situation. And then Sarah, just like Rachel and Leah, start forcing the issue. Okay? All right, so there's no disrespect here to Hagar and the child. As a matter of fact, when they finally do get kicked out, the messenger shows up and says, don't worry, there's protection here. Okay? You're not just being booted out to die in the wilderness. Okay, next. But notice that the fruit of forcing the issue does not usually go well. Okay? Taking matters into your own hand is usually, if not always, a very bad plan. Okay, next.
Olivia and Janet Hoffman. Rabbi, chapter 16, verse 13. When Hagar said, you are the El who sees, can we assume that Hagar was also following Torah as her master Abraham? If not, does the Almighty still see the affliction of the Gentiles?
No, she's saying, look, you're the El who actually sees and knows and understands, because, here she's dealing with her situation, and the messenger comes and says something to her that she didn't think anybody would know necessarily, and says, wow, you do actually know stuff. Okay, so think of sees, is aware, understands, has knowledge that would not otherwise readily be available. Okay, the messenger shows up and says, I'm going to increase your seed greatly, too numerous to be counted. And the messenger said to her, see, you are conceiving and bearing a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, and he's going to be a wild man, etc., etc. And she goes, wow, you are the El who sees. Even here I have seen after him who sees. In other words, got to remember, in their cultural background and everything else, they're not used to dealing with anything but stone and wood and, man-made stuff that really has nothing. As far as they'd ever seen in their lives, they've never really seen. Things were attributed to those things. It rained. Okay, the stone made it rain. Okay, it stopped raining. The stone made it stop raining. Okay, but they never really saw. Here, a messenger from the Most High comes and tells her something that should not have been known at this point. And she goes, wow, you actually see. You understand. And also it means you've been watching. You're aware of my situation. You understand my life. You've seen what happened to me. You saw that I was with Abram and Sarai and that now I'm out here in the wilderness. So you're the Elohim that sees. All right, next question.
Jersey Girl has a question on Genesis 17:1. He tells Avraham to walk perfectly, tamim, blameless/complete before him. Is this the same as the Greek for fulfill, plerou/complete in Matthew 5:17? Both also brought forth a people, yes?
It can be from the same thing. I mean, really, we're talking about the idea of having the words that are in the New Testament translated more as perfect, which is like when he tells the woman caught in adultery to go and be perfect and go and sin no more. In other words, he's trying to communicate the idea of integrity. Okay? He's saying, look, walk before me and have integrity. Be filled with integrity. It's not about perfection. It's not about just complete, meaning being to overflowing, because that same word, plerou, or however it is in the Greek, whatever, has to do with, may your joy be complete. Well, your joy doesn't need to have integrity, but it means may you be overflowing with joy. Okay? He says, but I didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill. I came to show you the fullness of something. Here he's saying, look, walk before me and have integrity. Be filled with integrity. So it's a different word, I think, than necessarily what's being translated into the Greek. But of course, language to language, could have been, the underlying word could have been tamim, and then in a somewhat flawed way changed into the Greek, which then gets changed into the English, and we've got these levels of challenge in trying to give you a translation when word for word doesn't work very well. Okay?
Olivia and Janet Hoffman, Rabbi, chapter 17, verse 28.
And by the way, thank you for taking this somewhat chronologically. Good job. Okay, 17:28.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's not a verse that's in the Bible, but okay. Since 17:27 is the last verse of the chapter.
Oh. Her Bible apparently has it. It says, would you please explain who are the 12 princes in the great nation indicated in this section?
Okay. That's in 17:20. Okay, so maybe not 28. Okay, and as for you, Ishmael, I have heard you, and see, I bless him, and shall make him bear fruit and greatly increase him, and he's to bring forth 12 princes, and I shall make him a great nation. And no, that still goes back into this is not an area of study that I've gotten into. So and by the way, even if I have got into it, it's all speculation. Okay, there's no verse later on that says, and this is the fulfillment of what was promised to Ishmael. Okay, so we don't know. Okay, but that was 7:20, not 28.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to trust people that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. But did you like that? So I said there's no such verse. There you go. All right.
Okay.
By the way, 17:28 is covered in Millennium and Kingdom Part 4.
That's exciting. Let's see. Okay.
And the 12 princes and all the other questions. The birds not being cut, all of that's in, yeah. In Millennium and Kingdom Part 4.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Lori Bornstein would like to know, why did Yah want them circumcised? I get the circumcision of the heart, that it was how you could tell the difference between Hebrew and Goya, but why that particular thing?
It never tells us in the explicit detail that you would like. I mean, look, there's a cutting away of flesh, which is a relatively very simple, straightforward metaphor as far as cutting away our flesh. Okay, all right. Okay, so, but this is something that was required, and we just accepted. This is one of those things that we would call part of the chukim. Yah said it, and he doesn't always tell us why. Okay, like why a red heifer? I don't know, because he said we need a red heifer. Okay? I mean, it's just, there's no real and a scarlet thread and this other thing. Well, that's just the way he's got his reasons, and we don't necessarily understand them. Ours is not to wonder, but to just do and obey, and that's it. Well, we can wonder, but we don't need to understand to obey. Okay? He says to be circumcised, then you should be circumcised. And by the way, that has never been done away with. I know that's a big argument out there. Bad argument.
For me personally, that was never even an argument. That was a surprise. That just never came up ever. That was just an assumption that was a big mind blower for me.
Amen. But for a lot of people, because it's, you come to find this out as an adult, you're thinking, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I don't think I want to do it. Okay, I get that. All right? Thankfully, I didn't have that choice, and I was 8 days old, and I don't remember it. Okay? Which is probably why you're supposed to do it at 8 days old. Of course, Abram does it to everybody, no matter how old they were at the time that he did it. To all of the men, right there. But, and by the way, it doesn't say there was a bunch of guys that had been trained and professional at this either when Abraham did it. He got probably pretty good after 5 or 6 of them, though, I'm guessing, now we look for somebody that does this, and that's what they do on a regular enough basis, and so we have somebody who knows what they're doing and everything. But, hey, listen, that's obedience for you right there. All right.
All right.
Please, somebody take me off this topic.
You have a comment?
Oh, look, it's almost 10 o'clock. We can start. Actually, that one says almost 11 o'clock.
Steve Waffle has a comment.
All right.
Couldn't circumcision, like you had said, obedience would have been...
Doesn't obedience to taking me off this topic have to do with...
Wouldn't have been a
he's going to plow forward anyway. Go ahead.
Wouldn't have been a true test of obedience because of the area which is being cut?
Of course. And we'll work on your obedience when I said take me off the topic. Okay, let's go.
All right, Alyssa Holmes. How does Yahweh feel about us telling a half-truth like Avram did for a good reason? Not for self-gain per se, but not for an evil motive.
Okay, let's... right before 10 o'clock. Okay, let's just understand that the commandment does not say, thou shalt not lie. It says, thou shalt not bear false witness. Okay, lying is a much more complex subject. In other words, the not expressing a full truth. Okay? Because there's, like you said, levels of misdirecting, mixing things, and she wasn't exactly not related to him, maybe in the level of like a half sister or some sort of type of thing through relatives, but he was clearly trying to hide that it was his wife, and so there was a hiding there. Just like you have those in the nations that were hiding the Jews during World War II and during the Holocaust and stuff, and they lied to protect them. Scripturally, there's not necessarily a commandment against misrepresenting the truth. I think it has a lot to do with the purpose of it. That's why the commandment is not to bear false witness against. Your grandmother comes to you and asks you what you think of her dress or her hat, you're going to say it's beautiful. No matter how much it is killing you to bite your tongue because you're about to explode in laughter or something. Okay? Your little child brings you something they drew. It's the greatest thing since Michelangelo, and you put it up on your refrigerator. You have no idea what they made. They said it was a cat and it looked like a dinosaur. I don't know, but they make something. We are not expressing the actual full truth. And so that doesn't equal sin in itself. There needs to be more to it than just the fact that what you state is not accurate. All right? So accuracy, or I should say inaccuracy in statements in itself is not sin. What is the purpose of it? Is it doing some protective good or whatever? Is it simply being respectfully polite to protect someone's feelings? I don't know. It's just a lot of gray in all of that. But just remember that while you look at the Ten Commandments on most church walls and most places where it says, thou shalt not kill, it doesn't say that. It says murder. It says, thou shalt not lie. It doesn't say that. It says bear false witness. You need to know what it actually says because they're not exactly the same thing. Yahweh told them to kill a lot of people. Okay? And there was a lot of fighting and a lot of stuff going on where people got killed. That's different than murder. Matter of fact, you've got places of refuge for people that accidentally kill as opposed to murder. Right? So it's very different. Okay? All right.
Michelle had a question. Abraham was the father of many nations, but was he the father of all the nations that exist now?
No, you got Ishmael being, well, I mean, that goes through Abraham still. I mean, look, you've got those that came down only through Shem, through Abraham, that are going to be that way. You've got those that went through the other of Noah's sons, and they're not going to be direct descendants that way when it's the father of many nations. But he's going to be the father of many nations through grafting in, not just through literal birth. And that's why we're told that if you are blah, 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 then you are also children of Abraham, or you are of Abraham's seed because of, and heirs of the promises, because of your choice. Okay, so we're told in the New Testament these kind of things, and we have those verses that kind of explain those things very clearly, okay? So, see if I can pull one out really fast. I don't know if I can. Right here, okay. Nope, that's not the verse I was looking for, but it does kind of cover the right idea. All right, so like for example in Ephesians 2, it says, so then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the set apart ones and members of the household of Elohim, if you're going to do these things, okay? And there are other verses. If you go through the Discovering Your Identity teaching, I cover all of this, okay? And so you'll get to see the places where it says that you would, like Isaac, you would be sons of Abraham. There are other places. Okay, here I found it, okay? Galatians. I know it's in the upper right-hand corner of the right-hand page. Ephesians 2 and Galatians 4, same thing. Okay, here you go. There is no Yehudite or Greek. There is no slave or free. There's no male or female. For you're all one in Messiah, Yeshua. And if you are of Messiah, then you are seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. See, so it's not about the bloodline necessarily. Okay? So I knew it was in the right spot. I recommend highly having a photographic memory. It does help. Okay, because then at least you know when you're looking, it saves a lot of time to look in the one spot. Okay? Thankfully, both of those are in the same spot, just in two different books. Galatians 3, 28, 29, and I said 4, but I meant 3, and Ephesians 2, 20 through like 22. Okay? In that range. Okay. So I'm glad, praise Yah, I got to find those verses quickly. That's the one I wanted, the one in Galatians. Okay? If you are of Messiah, then you are of Abraham's seed, regardless of what you were born. And that was the point I was trying to make, and that answers the question. So that's the verse I was thinking of. Thank you. Okay.
That's awesome because this next one also has to do with Galatians. In Galatians 3:8, Paul says that the gospel was preached to Abraham. How was the gospel preached to Abraham?
Well, it's very simple. We're all sadly not understanding what the good news is. Okay? The good news is the plan. The good news is not Messiah, although he's part of the plan. The good news is not the death, burial, and resurrection, although that's part of the plan. So it's part of the good news. But it's not the good news. It is good news. It's amazing news. Messiah coming, walking on the earth, dying, being resurrected, sitting at the right hand. But it's part of the bigger plan that starts with Abram being told, you shall be the father of many nations, and through your seed all the nations shall be blessed. That's the good news. Then the good news that Paul starts preaching, and Peter also to the Gentiles and to the dispersed, which is also James and others are preaching in John to the dispersion, is that there's that part of the prophesied restoration and coming back and being brought back together is also part of that good news plan. The good news is a full message. It's not the gospel of Messiah or, the gospel of Yeshua, whatever. It's the good news of the full plan, and you need to learn Yeshua's part in that plan. By the way, he's the initiator of the plan. Okay? And it didn't initiate in the flesh suit in, James, John, and Paul's day. Actually, he had already been resurrected by the time Paul even finds out about it. But no, he was still in his day, though. Remember, he starts persecuting the early believers. This was initiated from before the foundation of the earth, this plan. Sharing that information, that's the good news. The problem is you have the word gospel. I don't know, is gospel a type of music? Is gospel a, Godspell? Is it a rock and roll play? All right? It's good news. And what is the good news? The good news that was talked about. Now, Paul explains it in Galatians. They forced me to deal with Galatians at 10 o'clock. I'm in overtime here. I shouldn't have to deal with Galatians. All right. He says, now look, remember, he's saying this, look, and the scripture, having foreseen that Elohim would declare right the nations by belief, announced the good news to Abraham. What good news? That all nations shall be blessed in you. It's right there, but you can't see it. I'm not picking on you because you have been lied to and well-churched and have swallowed a delusion and everything else that was part of that plan, the enemy's plan. Okay? You've inherited lies. The verse is very straightforward. And the scripture, having foreseen that Elohim would declare right the nations by belief, announced the good news to Abraham, saying, all the nations shall be blessed in you, so that those who are in belief are blessed with Abraham the believer. It's explained right in the verse. Now, I'm not mocking. I want you to see how impossible it is to see things until you have all of the filters pulled away. I'm not saying the person that asked the question is not called and doesn't have eyes to see and ears to hear. Eyes to see, ears to hear is not an instantaneous, all of it's pulled away. It just means enough of it's pulled away so that you could start the journey and start asking and seeking. So apparently the person who asked the question still has some of that stuff there, as all of you do, so please don't get all like, whoa, get all cocky about it and think, oh, I understood that. Well, did you? Some of you are thinking, wow, I didn't even see that. There's a lot of verses that you're going to read that you have read millions of times, and all of a sudden you can say, wait a minute, it's as simple as what it just said. It says it right there. How did I never see that? Well, it was part of the plan. By the way, that also proves the Bible is telling the truth. That you can't see something that simple and obvious proves that there's another battle going on. A lot of people looking for proof that the Bible is true. When you're told you can't understand it without having your eyes open and your ears open, you would think when you talk to totally rational human beings, at least they were before you started talking to them, and try to share them the simplicity of their Bible that they can't see, don't get mad at them. Praise Yah. It proves things are exactly like he said. And by the way, that's for all those people out there that don't believe in the New Testament, only believe in the Old. A lot of what I'm quoting, the stuff that we're understanding is not in the Old. Those are things that are told to us only in the New, that people would be struggling in this way. So it's proof of your New Testament. Because we see those things play out that we're told in the New Testament, so you don't get told anywhere else. Not halakhic things. All the halakhic things are told you in the Old. But things about how people will act and behave and what they can and can't see, etc., you're told about that a lot more in the New. And then you see it play out. Does it make sense? And that was your overtime bonus. Okay, you got more or are we done?
Just two more.
All right.
Two quick ones.
Then they're optional for me to say no. Go ahead.
All right, Olivier, question from Andreita Hoffman.
Wait a minute. You guys have already hit your 3-question limit.
Yeah, they did. So, Rabbi, did Abraham know about the feasts like Sukkot and Pesach as much as he knew about tithing and offerings?
He probably knew about all that stuff. I mean, we can only assume that Torah was from the beginning. Genesis 26 tells us that Abraham kept the Torah. So, we're not there yet. We'll get to 26 here in a week or two. But, we'll see that it says that. Of course, at that point, we're dealing with Isaac, not Abraham. But, it does quote that Abraham did keep these things. So,
And last one, Evangeline. In chapter 17, both the names of Avram and Sarai were changed. Is that a kind of a seal to their covenant/blessing?
Look, we didn't get into it. I thought we'd actually get away with not having to get into it. I don't have real good answers except to tell you that both of their names are changed by adding a hey to it. Okay? We understand that the hey often can be looked at as adding Hashem or adding the name to their names. Okay? So to change Avram to Avraham, we have a hey added to it, and Sarai, the hey is added at the end of her name. Avram's is put in the middle. And so, we can read all kinds of deep things into that. But, okay, and so, Avram, some will say means exalted father to a certain degree, like he was honored as, and then Avraham meaning father of nations. Okay, and for Sarai, same thing. We're adding the hey to add the name. So, so yes, in certain sense, it does have to do with sealing. But what you do see is that often names are changed, and it's important to see them change. It does, seem to be significant on different levels. And so it's good that you observed that and noticed it. Okay, let's get someone to go ahead and close us in prayer. Okay, give it to Rick. You're right there. Rick, go ahead and close us.
Abba, Father, we come before you and thank you for your Torah, your truth, your instructions, your Son Yeshua, and all that you have given us to learn and understand, to do, to practice, to be able to defend, so that we might hear good, well done, good and faithful servant from our Messiah, Yeshua. And we thank you for the instruction. We thank you for our rabbi, the insights he's able to give us into your word, the culture, the idioms, so that we can understand and do and obey as obedient children. We ask your blessing on everyone here and everyone in the live stream, that you would open their eyes, their hearts, their minds, their ears to your truths, so that they may also march into the kingdom under the direction of our Messiah Yeshua, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right. By the way, I just looked it up just to confirm because I just wanted to answer the question. The 12 princes, this could be referring to the 12 imams. The 12th imam, the Mahdi, that's being looked forward to as part of end-time prophecy that a lot of people point at. So that may be a part of the whole Ishmael thing as well. Okay? Just throwing that out there. Okay. Because I know somebody's going to be out there pointing that out. So anyway. All right, great study. I really appreciate it. Awesome job, everybody. Okay. As the weather's gotten colder, clapping is helping warm my hands back up. They're a little cold and frozen. 323 we got on there today. All right, fantastic job. All right, anybody that's still on there, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. That'd be fantastic. It'll help a lot. Those of you that want to wave goodbye can come on up here. All right. Notice a lot of you have your black MTOI sweatshirts on. I almost felt like Torah Study tonight is sponsored by the black MTOI sweatshirt. There you go. All right. Okay, so on 3, we're going, oh, there we got the beard scratching going on. All right. On 3, we're going to wish everybody a Laila Tov, which is good night, Shavua Tov, which is have a good week, and then we'll tell them we love them. You ready? 1, 2, 3. There you go. You got me first.